Hello and welcome to SBK Edge Rush Extra. Never forget the extra Tom Collins. And more importantly than that, Happy New Year. How is 2023 treating you so far?
Happy New Year to you too, Nat, and to all our viewers at home. Yeah, 2023 is looking good. It's looking up. The Packers have a great chance to make the playoffs. We control our own destiny. We're going to get involved in this matchup this week. But I have my hopes and dreams back, Nat.
You know, I can see that, of course, you're resplendent in Packers merch once again. I've been scratching my head to think if there was anyone around the NFL world that gave the Packers a chance in hell of making the playoffs 6-7. Oh, wait a minute. I did. I called the Packers as a playoff team when nobody else believed. Why don't we start with them? Lions-Packers. Could be a play-in game for both teams, of course, because if the Rams beat Seattle, that means that the Lions have a shot at making the playoffs if they can take down the Packers. If not, well, I'm sure they're more than happy to play spoiler. These are two teams that were dead and buried midway through the season. So the fact they're both in this situation is extraordinary. Let's start with the Packers, a team so close to your heart. And start with their defense, because there's so much emphasis on they've got the ground game going, Rodgers is balling again. But isn't it the defense that's been the difference in the last few weeks?
100%. Yes, the play calling has been a lot better. As you say, the ground game's working. Aaron Rodgers has been much more precise and efficient with the ball as well. But this defense, last week against the Vikings, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. We've seen on numerous occasions, especially during mid-season when we lost 7 out of 8 games, and it looked like we were just giving up all hope of the playoffs, that the defense just weren't turning up. We initially were really good against the run, then we became terrible against the run. And it was just, there was nothing to pin your hat on to say, you know what, this defense can stand up against the best teams in the league. Last week, wow, they came to play, didn't they? They stopped the Vikings, only 3 points at halftime for Minnesota, 17 at the end of the game, but they gave up on the last drive, with the game already being won. I was really impressed. And also special teams. I don't think I've ever spoken about the Packers and gone, yeah, this special teams unit is decent, good enough to be towards the top of the league in that regard. But special teams last week, Nixon with that run back. God, I was celebrating that.
I bet you were. He has been, wish there was a camera on you at home when that was going in. He has been one of the catalysts in this turnaround. Obviously, so has Christian Watson. Aaron Rodgers cited Watson when asked what has been the big change, and the numbers don't lie. Since week 10, this is Elias Sports Bureau reporting this. Since week 10, Watson's had 8 touchdowns, 7 receiving and 1 rushing. And according to Elias, only Randy Moss, the only other rookie receiver in NFL history with 8 scrimmage touchdowns over a 4-game span. That is pretty esteemed company to be in.
Yeah, 100%. Of course, he's now the number 1 wide receiver at the Packers, so he's getting plenty of targets, plenty of looks. But at the same time, he's still got to catch the ball. And I have to own up. I really do, because not only am I a Packers fan, and I should believe in our guys, and you know what I do now? I do believe in Christian Watson, but in about week 10 in fantasy football, I traded him away.
You did.
I traded him away. I did. I drafted him in the first round. I know it's a franchise league, drafted him in the first round. I should have thought long term, Christian Watson's going to come good. But I didn't really love him in college, and he wasn't really performing in the first few weeks of the season. So I thought, you know what, I'll cut my losses, trade him for a first round pick next year. It didn't work out.
Unbelievable. There are 2 seminal moments for Christian in this season. The first, of course, is that look that Aaron Rodgers gave him after the drop ball week 1, which seemed to set the tone for the early stage of the Packers season, and you cutting in week 10 in your Dynasty Fantasy League. Those 2 things have motivated him to be playing at the Randy Moss level. So things chiming well for Green Bay, obviously. And it is remarkable that they have turned things around, although, like I said, I'm not altogether surprised they've been able to do it. Detroit, I am more surprised about, because they were staring down the barrel. And I thought Dan Campbell, much as we love him, is done and dusted. He made some fundamental changes in terms of coaching personnel, some brave changes, and things have completely turned around for them ever since. They've had an extraordinary run. So even if they don't make the playoffs, it's been a really good season for them. And certainly there is the foundation there for a very exciting team going forwards. One of the big issues, though, they've got against Green Bay is stopping the run. It's been a problem for Detroit all season long. They're averaging, or rather, the opposition is averaging 5.32 yards per carry against them, which is in the lower reaches in terms of run D in the NFL. So is that the key to this game, do you think? Given the fact the Packers have been finally given the rock to their running backs, and we've been crying out for them to do that for weeks and weeks and weeks, if they can't stop Dylan and co, Detroit this is, then that is game, set and match? Or do you think there are other crinkles and nuances to it?
I think it could be. Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon have been crucial to the Packers' success in the latter part of this season. 4 consecutive victories. As I said, the play calling, giving the ball to the running backs in crucial situations has helped us win those games. This Detroit defense is terrible. It's just hemorrhaging yardage, points. They're just probably one of the worst units in the league, as well as the Vikings that we saw last week. So I think Aaron Rodgers will probably have a field day against this defense. I think they'll run the ball a lot, set up play action, Christian Watson on the bomb, Alan Lazard and crossing routes. I think it's going to be perfect for the Packers offense. Packers are 4.5-point favorites on the spread. This is a situation where my heart overrules my head and I just don't want to have a bet in the game, but I can certainly see why you would want to take Packers with the points or even play the over-under. It's set at 49. Now, earlier in the year when the Lions and Packers faced each other, it finished 15-9 to the Lions. But don't forget, Aaron Rodgers stunk in that game. He really did. In terms of his high standards, he threw a couple of picks that shouldn't have occurred in the end zone. So I think the Packers are probably going to put up a lot more points than the 9 they put on that day. Maybe this game hits the over. It's prime time. There's a lot on the line. I expect the offenses to turn up on both sides, and I expect the Packers to overmatch this Lions defense.
I like that. The over might be the play. Then, of course, the over in the Vikings-Packers game was my Drew Lock of the week last week, which rolled on home thanks to your
Fantastic
Packers.
Pick.
Appreciate that, Crystal Tom. From you, that is high praise indeed. That is like Christian Watson being on the same level as Randy Moss. You giving me a fantastic pick nod. I quite like the over in this one as well. I think, as you rightly say, Detroit have been hemorrhaging points all season long. You score 50, we score 55 is their motto. The over looks tempting to me. We got a weather check though, because of course this time of year always dangerous to bet the over at Lambeau.
Yeah, well, I checked a couple of days ago. I haven't actually checked in the last 48 hours, which I probably should have, but all I saw was it was cold but dry, and I think that's key for both these teams. If there is rain or snow or anything like that, then it would favour the Packers, in my opinion, just because of history and how much experience Rodgers has in that situation compared to Jared Goff, who was playing a lot of his time down south in the nice weather. So I think it's dry at this stage, but always keep an eye on that forecast.
If you're going to play the over, keep an eye on that. All right, next up, let's talk Patriots Bills. Of course, it has been such a challenging week for the Buffalo Bills organization, and of course the wider world of the NFL all coming together for Damar Hamlin. Really, really encouraging news in the last 24 hours. And we're recording this on Friday morning. Hamlin is conscious, responsive, cognizant of people talking to him. So really, really positive news that he is on the way to making a recovery. It was, haunting moment. And it was terrific to see how the football world came together in support of him. And as was well documented on the superb broadcasting that we saw on ESPN, and of course in the immediate aftermath of the incident, football doesn't matter when you have situations like that. And that is relevant, I think, to the inevitable discussions that are happening now about the seedings in the AFC and what's going to happen. And at the time of recording this, there hasn't been qualification as to what will happen. There are a number of different ideas on the table, including potentially having the AFC Championship at a neutral ground. I thought that was quite an interesting idea. It has the Bengals-Bills game, which is unlikely to be replayed. There is a slight chance that it might be, but it's highly likely that it won't. It does therefore create a challenge for the NFL to look at the AFC seeding. So bearing all that in mind and bearing the obvious fact that Damar Hamlin's health is far more important than anything else. In relation to this game, Tom, do you think the Bills, having gone through such an emotional week, will find it very difficult in this situation, particularly given the fact that it's not as clear cut as it might have been in footballing terms, that if we win, we get the number 1 seed or whatever, the circumstance might have been. And they will be looking ahead now to the playoffs, or will the opposite be the case? They will be highly motivated, highly emotional, highly charged. And given the seemingly really positive news about Damar, they will be really, really up for this.
Yeah, beautifully summed up, I have to say, Nat. Just regarding Damar Hamlin's situation, looking forward as a punter in this game, I think it's going to be the latter. I think they're going to be super motivated, driven to succeed, mostly because of that good news we've had a couple of days ago, or yesterday, in fact, about Damar Hamlin being a bit more responsive than he was when he first was admitted to hospital. it was a horrific scene, and you could see on the faces of Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and other players. Stephon Diggs was another that comes to my mind. They were just distraught. And sometimes moments like that can ruin a team. But in other times, when you have a tight knit group of a lot of good sportsmen with fantastic characteristics, it can knit the team together even more. And I think Buffalo are going to succeed and strive to succeed in the latter part of this year, not only for themselves, but also for Damar Hamlin and his health. It just brings that extra amount of passion, doesn't it? It's never an ideal situation, but I think it will play to the hands of Buffalo going towards the playoffs. And although in this game, I fancy the under, the line is set to 42.5. I think Buffalo are going to come out on top. They're 7-point favourites on the spread, which is a bit of a dodgy number if you're just looking at this from a punting perspective, because you don't know how quickly they're going to turn up. You know, sometimes in these games, if you're backing a team with a 7-point handicap, you want them to start strong. You don't want them to go 2 scores down. If they go 10 points down in the first quarter, you're thinking, wow, I better rip up that ticket. And you don't really know the mentality of this team after such an incident. But what I do know is in that second half of that game, even if they are down, they're going to be fighting back. And we've got 2 great defenses on either side, Buffalo and New England Patriots. I think they'll stop each other, cancel each other out in the early stages, and then Buffalo are really going to succeed later on in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. I mean, the Pats have a lot at stake here. They can make the playoffs if they get the win. You break down the Pats season, head scratching really, that they're another team that is in this mix, that as in they have a shot at the playoffs when you consider they're a pretty indifferent Belichick Patriots iteration. When you drill down a bit further and look at how they've got there, well, they've had wins against teams that aren't much cop, and they struggle against good teams. They're 0-4 against teams that are currently in the playoff picture. In those games, they're giving up 29 points per game. So in simple terms, the Patriots go up against a serious contender, they're often in trouble. And of course, the Bills are a serious contender. They're also 1-5 against the spread, the Patriots, in their last 6 games as well. So I think it's worth bearing that in mind too. I'm with you on this. I think the Bills are going to be charged. I think they're going to be motivated to put one over their old foe and to roll into the playoffs with this renewed energy, given the great news that we've had about Damar Hamlin over the last 24 hours. I think the Bills covering is a good play here. All right, let's wrap things up with a Saturday night play-in game between the Jags and the Titans. It's all on the line for the AFC South. The Jags heavily favored in this one, Crystal Tom. What is the line looking like right now?
Yeah, the Jags are 6-point favourites on the spread, which is interesting. Very interesting. And you know what? I want to say this now because I didn't think I'd say it all year. I never thought I'd be this excited about an AFC South game. I'm really excited. I can't wait for it now.
Oh, there's been a lot of negativity about this. This is just instrumental, or rather indicative of why the NFL playoff expansion is a mistake. For a start, this is a divisional game, so they would have made the playoffs anyway, right? But for the division title. But I love this. The Jags and Titans are not great teams, but a play-in is nothing better than a play-in game. And I don't care whoever gets through gets shellacked in the first round, in the wildcard round of the playoffs. I love the fact that they are in the mix. The Titans 0-5-1 against the spread in their last 6. The wheels have absolutely come off for them then. Of course, that is not a coincidental factor when you look at Ryan Tannehill's injury. And Titans fans, be careful what you wish for, because there are a lot of Titans fans going into this season wanting to move on from Tannehill after his playoff meltdown last year, and they've seen what the future looks like without him. It has been a real problem for them offensively. They've been averaging just 10.5 points per game since week 12. That is horrendous. Of course, Henry's had injury issues in the mix as well. They've now moved on to Josh Dobbs, who's I guess we call him a journeyman. He's been around, 5-6 years, bouncing around that backup netherworld. Hasn't really done a huge amount as a starter in the NFL, but certainly feel confident that he can air the ball out, right? I mean, they certainly let him do that much more than Malik Willis, their rookie quarterback who they had in for a few weeks, who clearly isn't ready for the NFL yet. Dobbs, it was so-so. His performance against Dallas, his completion rate wasn't great, just over 50%, but they weren't worried to air the ball out. And that, of course, is critical for this Titans offense. A lot of people, I think, misconstrue that it's Derrick Henry or bust, but one of the reasons they've had so much success in recent years is because Tannehill is a very composed pocket passer and a very composed quarterback that can really feed off the play action when you've got Henry tearing things up. So they do need a passing game. They can't just hand the rock to Henry 50 times a game. And Dobbs gives them a shot, doesn't he?
He does. 6-year veteran in the league, definitely a journeyman. Had a time at Pittsburgh as well. I think his acquisition a couple of weeks ago, I know he played in that game against Dallas, but he literally had 6 days or 3 days or something like that to work on
Crazy.
the playbook, which was just ridiculous. But I think his acquisition later in this season has been a positive for Mike Vrabel because, as you've touched on, he just doesn't believe in Malik Willis at the moment. And that's nothing to his ability, but he's just not ready to be a pocket passer or throw the ball at all in this league, as already proven. 3 games, not thrown for over 100 yards in any of them. Can't really have that in a playoff team. So I think Josh Dobbs is key, but also, as you've touched on, the main aspect to this game for the Titans is not Derrick Henry for the first time ever, although he does have a good record against the Jacksonville Jaguars, I have to say. But it is if Treylon Burks plays, because he's questionable right now with a groin injury. He has been their star receiver when he's been able to play this year. If he's not in that lineup, they have no deep threat aside from Nick Westbrook-Akina. And I don't want to hang my hat on him being the guy to make the plays. So they need Treylon Burks. And if Burks doesn't play, well, this Jacksonville Jaguars defense is just going to be right in the middle. They're just going to be looking for Derrick Henry every single play because we just know that he's the only guy for the Titans right now that can put up points. And Titans have already been hammered by Jacksonville this year. What was it, 36-22? Trevor Lawrence had a field day throwing for 368 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11 catches for Evan Ingram for 162 yards and 2 touchdowns. Zay Jones had 12 targets. Christian Watson was barely a factor in that game. He had 5 catches for 45 yards, the number 1 wide receiver on this team. The running game wasn't leaned upon at all. We've seen Travis Etienne in recent weeks just dominate. He wasn't even asked to put up points, and they still put up 36 on the Titans because they couldn't really move the ball all that much. So, you know, if Treylon Burks doesn't play this game, the Titans are looking at another bleak score, and the Jacksonville Jaguars are 6-point favorites on the spread. I'd be keen to take that, though. If you're doing accumulators or multiple bets, my way of playing this game would be by just teasing the Jaguars slightly. I'd play with a 2-point handicap because I think if you've got 2 points on your side with the Jacksonville Jaguars, this game could easily be a field goal if Trevor Lawrence decides, you know what, I don't want to go to Christian Watson every play or Evan Ingram on every play. And they could just run the ball a lot and win by 3 points, but also they could win this by 14.
Yeah, I agree. 6 is an interesting number here when you're thinking about the Titans, despite the fact the stat I rolled out about how poor they've been against the spread in recent weeks. I mean, this is typically a Vrabel side is typically attritional, keeps things close. The defensive injuries they've had are the reason why the wheels have come off. I mean, forget Tannehill. That's obviously been a big problem for them. Offensively, you've cited the fact that they haven't got enough strength and depth offensively outside of Henry and Treylon Burks. But defensively, look, I mean, I think they've been afflicted with more injuries than any other team in the NFL this season. I think statistically that is the case. They've had a really bad run of luck, and defensively they are so brittle now because of that. If you look at their IR list, look at the players that they are missing, and that number of key players, of course, missing in the game you mentioned a few weeks back when the Jags rolled all over them. So I think irrespective of whether they can get some offense going here, they're not going to be able to slow down a Jaguars offense that has really found its groove. Doug Peterson has worked wonders with Trevor Lawrence in the second year, as everybody had hoped. And you can scratch off that ridiculous first year and the Urban Meyer experiment that was the prototype of dysfunction. This is a quarterback that we expected to see. This is a phenom kind of player that really starting to roll now. And I think much like the Detroit Lions, whatever happens this weekend for the Jags, it is a really, really positive end to the season. They are going to be serious contenders, I think, over the next few years. So happy days for them. More difficult prognosis, I think, for the Titans. I think there's going to be a lot of change there. I hope they keep the faith with Mike Vrabel because I've been hearing some rumblings, given the fact that GM, of course, went out a few weeks back. I mean, that would be crazy to move on from Vrabel. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL.
100% agree. Mike Vrabel is one of the best tactical minds. He's done brilliantly well with a squad that doesn't necessarily have the talent of many others that would be around 500 this year or higher. He's just done phenomenally with this team. And we've touched on the Titans defense having lots of injuries. And when you have so many injuries, there's only a certain amount of depth at each position that you can go into. If you're looking at 3rd, 4th, 5th string players in their position, well, you're really going to struggle against elite wide receivers, running backs, quarterback, whatever. I just want to also put some respect on the name of Foyesade Oluwakan because the Jacksonville Jaguars, this defense isn't phenomenal. They've given up a lot of points in numerous games this year. They gave up 34 to Dallas, for example. However, in the last 2 weeks, they've given up just 3 points to each of those two teams, not conceded a touchdown for 3 weeks now. And Foyesade Aluakan, 172 tackles on the year, leading tackler in the NFL. He's done brilliantly in the heart of that defense. And if he keeps turning up, and even in the playoffs, who knows what will happen? If the Jacksonville Jaguars win this game, they could cause a shock in the AFC.
Oh, Crystal Tom calling the Jags for the Super Bowl. I love it. You heard it. But that's actually how I open the Nat Coombs Show pod with Iron Mike this week. The Packers are going to win the Super Bowl. They are. They're going to do it. It's going to be the greatest America's game we've ever seen. Of course, it's going to have Rodgers and Christian Watson in. There's no doubt about it. I think it's going to happen. I believe Crystal Tom Collins. I know you do as well. Incidentally, I mentioned the podcast over on that pod feed. You can check out SBK, Edge Rush, me and Propo, and of course, Crystal Tom with more picks for this weekend's slate. So just go and find that on your podcatcher of choice and lots of other episodes in the vault as well. One more thing for me to do before we get out of Dodge. Any new SBK customer, bet £10 and you get £30 in free bets. Of course, you got to gamble responsibly. 18 plus. BeGambleAware.org. Great to see you, Tom. Rolling into 2023 with that swagger.
Yeah, I'm praying for a good result in that. And if we do get a good result next week, I'm going to be a very happy guy.
You and me both, because I'm going to clip up the Packers are making the playoffs and I'm just going to play it indefinitely for the next 10 years.
You're Nostradamus.
Take care, man. See you soon.